to inject liquidity within the Eurozone, which had a disadvantage over here.
Yeah. On the whole, taking a longer perspective, it had much more advantages to have the possibility and the margin of maneuver given by the autonomous monetary policy, in our case.
Thank you.
But that might be specific to Hungary.
Ms. Juraskova?
Actually, as to our banking sector in the Czech Republic, actually the liquidity in the Czech market is enough. So this is not the push for our country to thinking about entering banking union in 1 to 3 years. Also, if we take it from another point of view, from the, for example, lender of last resort perspective, which should be in a banking for banking union, the ECB. So this is also not the case or argument for the Czech Republic, because our banking system is quite resistant. It was shown during the last financial crisis, major problems. As to the second question, as to our reaction on 5 Presidents' report, the Czech Republic understands the purpose of deeper integration of the Eurozone, and I think that we welcome that all EU member states are included in the discussion of the proposed measures, because they have also clear impact on non-Eurozone members. And as I said, what is important for us, that the approach to the euro and non-euro area member states should remain balanced. As to the fiscal union, we agree that the more unified fiscal union policy has to play a role in the properly functioning monetary union. So we understand this direction in European Commission.
Okay, but you're also of the view of Mr. Balogh that it was more in your interest or more in the interest of your country to stay outside for a moment than to be part of it, if you look back over the last 7 years. Okay, is there already any bet who will be the next member? Any bet from the audience? I don't know. Let's say the question was up, but I thought there was no response, so we were kept in complete darkness. Hans, you have a bet? But Hans is coming from the western part, so he's a compatriot. Could you probably explain why, Hans? There is a microphone.
You should ask David Cameron how it is.
But we had to ask this morning Lidington, let's say, whether he had a response on that. But of course, coming from London, he probably will have a very clear reply on that question. Any other bets? No? From this side of the EU on this issue? Then we probably go on to our next questions. I mean, there was a suggestion, let's say, that we Oh, you wanted to say something first, Mr. Balogh?
I didn't react on the 5 Presidents' report. And you have mentioned that it is mostly for the Eurozone. Again, I would give a more fine-tuned reaction to that. I think that the 5 Presidents' reports is for the 28, except for that there are certain structures proposed, a new institution proposed, which should be, at the first wave, mandatory for the Eurozone members only. But, and as we see it from the outside, ins and outs, but we are the outs, whatever negotiations we start, basically, the 5 Presidents' report is a vision, and we welcome that finally, after so many years now, at least a first blueprint of a future of the Euro, the direction or a roadmap, if you wish, where the European Union would like to go is there, and that's absolutely positive. We have to have a vision, especially after a crisis situation. But it has to be very clear that, yes, you are right, there are institutions to be put in place in one way or another. There are many discussions yet. It is not crystal clear yet in many respects what will be the final form, what legal obligation will remain, but mandatory only for the Eurozone countries. But the whole negotiation should be, first of all, transparent, second, inclusive, outsiders should be included, taking part in the negotiation, because in the future that will be our institutions also. So we want to take part, how whatever fiscal or competitiveness authorities would look like. And also, as in the case of the banking union, to be open for accession even without joining the Eurozone, if the country itself is able to and willing to join, because the advantages, of course, taking up all the obligations on voluntary basis, if the advantages seems to be positive. So with this understanding, we think that it is also for the 28 and not only for the Eurozone members, and we are very keen and we are trying to follow very strongly how the fine-tuning of this blueprint, if you wish, will develop. We take part in discussion and we want to be included.
So, a very important point. You're not formally included in the Five Presidents' Report's discussions, but you would like to be included, or you're informally included, but you like to be more formally included?
No, we are included. We are already included in the discussions to the extent the general discussion has started at the level of ministers in ECOFIN, for instance. We are part of that discussion, no question about that. But the details of the realization of these proposals, the details of the proposed institutions, the legal background is not developed at all. Maybe somewhere in the back corridors, but not publicly. But as soon as it develops, and we are going into the details, we would like to remain part of the discussions, even in the more detailed.
So you were part of it, but you're afraid that you will not part of discussing, for example, the details of this fiscal council, of this competitiveness council?
No, I wouldn't say that we are afraid. We want to be sure that we are not forgotten or we are not ignored. But we don't afraid. For the time being, we have got assurances, quite important assurances from Eurozone member states, and also from the presidency, and also from the Commission, that we will be included. But we want to make, because if you read the document, and as you had the impression that it is more for the Eurozone than for the outsiders, that is from the text of it is sometimes opaque. It is not clear-cut in all chapters, whether it is for the 28, whether it is only for the 19. And that's why we think that this clarification, crystallizing mandatory basis, the Eurozone countries, but the rest of these countries should be included. And anyone is reading the text, don't misunderstand or don't have, I would say, incorrect conclusions from the opaqueness of the text. That's why I say we don't have any fear. So far, outsiders will be on continuous basis involved. But that's, I think, a very important issue.
Yeah, exactly. Very important point. I'm confused, I must confess. If I read it, I would think, let's say, it has to do with fiscal issues, mostly for the Eurozone. Of course, it's a Five Presidents report. We know that one of these five presidents is not part of the Eurozone, so he may have brought up his issues as well, but formally he's there to represent the European Council. So anyhow, Ms. Juroskova or Mr. Lassay, you want to say?
Actually, just from the point of non-Eurozone country, absolutely we stressed and we agreed that the equal treatment of should be fulfilled, and also the approach to Euro and non-Euro countries should be balanced. As to the question of Five Presidency report or another ones, but I think it's all words which are quite often heard from the non-Eurozone countries.
Yeah. Probably a question to Mr. Lassay. Let's say, your perspective on this Five Presidents report, but being inside the Eurozone, if you look at your neighboring countries, meaning, do you see this as being a report of essentially the Eurozone club, or is it really a report of the EU as a whole? Is it not essentially 90% of the issues addressing Eurozone-related issues, and that mostly hardly considers the issues relevant to the non-Eurozone countries, and by this is already creating, I mean, a kind of an implicit divide between the Eurozone and non-Eurozone countries?
I'm looking at the report as a report for the 28, definitely. But I think it's quite natural that there is some stress or some focus on what's going on in the Eurozone, because as we have said, like once you have given up the monetary autonomy and once the crisis relates to the currency that is common for several member states, so it's natural that there are many proposals with a particular side of the Eurozone members. But I wouldn't say it's exclusive for the Eurozone, it's for the 28. It has to be for 28. And since we have a lot of discussions on that, and I think it doesn't contain all the details because, as you said, it's a vision. I mean, it has got some ideas. Come up with the ideas such as European Fiscal Board, etc. We can get to that in a while, but I think that it engages member states inside and outside of the Eurozone in the discussion, and then after we can work on technical details and design those elements and institutions in detail.
But for is extremely important. Meaning, the further roadmap or a further technical plan related to what was in the 5 Presidents' report is extremely important in the domain of economic policy making.
Absolutely it is. For us, for sure, and I believe for colleagues as well.
Okay. Are there any questions in the audience about the 5 Presidents' report? Now, I mean, of course, it's a technical issue, but I think it's a very important issue. I personally found the report, I think there were some others in the audience who thought that with me lacked technical detail. I wanted to have more of these details about, if you say we want to have a fiscal union by 2027, how we would get there. That's why I ask you the question. So you hope, let's say, that these things will be worked out in the coming years? Months and years?
Months and years. The Commission announced 2 weeks ago that in 2016 they set up an expert group that will work on the institutions or proposals for the stage 2. We are quite happy that it will be during the time of the Slovak presidency in a year's time. So we are very happy to assist in that because it's the phase 2 is a priority for us. And also the Commission indicated that in 2017 they will publish a white paper, which will go definitely into more detail than the 5 Presidents' report on the measures in the phase 2. So I believe these discussions are already happening, will be happening, and in the months and years to come, and there will be more concrete proposals.
There's one question at the back. Yes, we can probably take it right away. If it's related to the 5 Presidents' report, sorry, more or less, economic policy making.
Thank you, Matthias Rummer from the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Just a question on the report in relation to competitiveness reforms in general. I mean, would you be able to say which is the more important, implementing the 5 Presidents' reports or pushing ahead with more general competitiveness reforms such as deepening the single market, trade, education, research, and so forth?
It's certainly overlapping. Of course, there are things which are overlapping with the broader single market agenda, the structural reforms which were mentioned this morning, and then the specific things related to what is in the 5 Presidents' report. But there also, since you're representing Sweden, it's related to issues which are of relevance for the EU 28. Yes, Mr. Palok.
Yeah, I think that that's a very important point, that while we are speaking the 5 Presidents' report, we are always saying, from an outsider's point of view, that the integrity of the single market should not be touched upon. I mean, it should be kept and even strengthened to the extent possible. The second point, out of that it comes that competitiveness or improvement of competitiveness is an issue and a very important issue. But while we are concentrating on the structural issues, we might have a vision, and we are not against it, that the European Union is moving ahead, having some future ideas, future objectives before its eyes, including with all the 28 countries. And it is something constructing in the movement. How would I put it, this 5 Presidents' report? In my understanding, if you compare with paintings, first the main sketch is already on the picture. The main protagonist in a structured way are already on the picture. But colors, background, I would say shadows and sunshine is not painted yet. And in the coming weeks, months, and even years, now the details of the whole picture will be developed. And maybe I can even imagine that the painter the painters together, the 28 painters, will decide that one protagonist which was put on the canvas at the beginning maybe should disappear and that other protagonist should be put there. So what I mean, it is a very constructive, a kind of a ongoing production, if you wish, where really the sketch is already there, and we really welcome that, as I said. But we know that there are plenty of work still to arrive to finishing or finalizing the picture, and hopefully to put it in the Louvre, or somewhere else. But really, I think that's a good start. And within that, competitiveness, strengthening competitiveness, and if I may have between brackets, any intention to deteriorate competitiveness should be avoided. What I mean by deteriorating competitiveness, there are certain proposals, for instance, about strengthening social dimensions. And very few people is thinking, when speaking about strengthening social dimensions, it's the question of competitiveness. Countries outside of the Eurozone, many countries outside of the Eurozone, would like to still improve its competitiveness. It's partly a question of wages, obviously. But once we are putting the social dimensions in, and we would have a kind of a push for higher wages suddenly and not in an organic way, that would mean that these countries' competitiveness would deteriorate, their convergence would slow down or even would turn in the other direction, and overall, the EU overall competitiveness would deteriorate. Exactly. If today there are transports, relatively low-cost transports from Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Poland, this adds up to the competitiveness of German, French, and Spanish companies. If I, with the social dimension element, I bringing up the wages and I just try to make disappear this competitive advantage, that would mean that French, Spanish, and German companies who are using this transport possibility would be less competitive. And I think that on the long run, medium and long run, strengthening of the competitiveness is an issue for the European Union. We know, looking Asia, looking the United States, we can't afford to deteriorate competitiveness. On the contrary, that's something which we have to strengthen very strongly.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Yeroskova, you have a view on this issue of the integrity of single market, the competitiveness of the EU overall, not too much kind of new burdens?
It's difficult to make the balance between this two, but as to something news in European Union, whether institution, whether concept, and so on, there should be something like higher principle, like in the way that there should be focus on evaluation of existing instruments before creating a new one. And this is not a reaction to the 5 presidency report, because from the position of the Czech Republic, we welcome this concept. But as to the creation, the fiscal authority, and so on, we think that this principle should be followed.
Okay. If I could link up to another issue, as I said already this morning, Commissioner Dombrovskis referred to, or the Vice President Dombrovskis referred to the eventual review of the treaty. What is coming often up in Brussels if we revise the treaty to do things where we distinguish between the Eurozone and the non-Eurozone. And then we're back into this issue which you mentioned or back into another issue which is high on the table in Brussels, by the way, which the Brits, in the context of the British reform proposals which they want to have from Brussels, some guarantee that they will not be discriminated against in the context of the single market. If I could ask a question first to Mr. Lessay, how you look at it from your perspective, if there were to be a treaty review, whether you would favor a distinction between the Eurozone and the non-Eurozone, which has to do with kind of the Eurozone Council, which has to do with the accountability mechanisms, with the transparency, with the reporting from the Eurozone, which formally is still something which is somewhere in limbo.
If you allow me, I would like to very briefly react to the question from the audience before I address your question. I do not think that the issues or the document of 5 presidents and competitiveness are these two issues that they would be in conflict. Actually, the Five Presidents report contains proposals for national competitiveness authorities. And I don't think that it's either or question, like either you have Five Presidents' visions or you keep a single market. I think these two are not mutually exclusive. They should complement each other. And as we said, single market, although it can be improved, it's there. So you don't need to deal with that too much in a sort of visionary document or a visionary sketch. So I'd like to subscribe to what has been said before. To your question on treaties, I don't feel I have the mandate to talk for the Slovak government on treaties that would need to be coordinated with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Nevertheless, when we talk about further integration and further steps, let's say on our way to fiscal union or on our way to deeper fiscally integrate the Eurozone or the EU, we have in mind also some mechanisms that are feasible without treaty changes. So we believe that, and now it's my personal view, like treaty will have to change at some point. I'm not saying now or in a year or in a few years, but it will be a lengthy process. It will be a very political process. I think it will be a necessary process.
Could be divisive as well for the EU.
Pardon me?
It could be divisive.
Well, but all the discussions are in a way divisive. So you have different views, and then hopefully you come at the end and have some common decisions. So I'm not so skeptical that it would be divisive in the way like it would be the end of the EU. No, I don't think so. And
any views from the audience on the whole issue of Five Presidents report, treaty review? Yes, there's somebody in the middle. It could also be related to, for example, what Britain is putting on the table in Brussels. If you please introduce yourself.
My name is Fabien Villamin. I work at Egmont, the Royal Institute for International Relations. I have a question regarding the last part of the report, the political aspects, because it is not clear what exactly they want to do regarding accountability. They mentioned the fact that we have to improve the role of national parliaments, of the European Parliament, but we don't know exactly what it means. In my point of view, we need to create a Eurozone committee within the European Parliament. I would like to know, what do you think about that? Thank you.
So meaning you're addressing the question, or you want to have the question responded, which I raised, whether you need to have a Eurozone committee for which within the Parliament, basically a form of accountability of the Eurozone group towards the European Parliament, which is already going in the direction of what I said.
So,
Mr. Balog?
Good question. I think that the last part of the Five Presidents report is a part of the sketch, which is not very elaborated yet. The idea is obviously there, but it is, as far as I know, it is not very intensively discussed so far, even within the European Union. But that raises a question about democratic accountability, which I think is a very legitimate question, strengthening democratic legitimacy, the much stronger involvement of national parliaments, that's again a legitimate question, and not necessarily, I think the Commission or ourselves have the final answer, what would be the techniques, what would be the solution for that. But the objective, and I fully agree with that, the objective is there. Your question, whether it can be divisive. Frankly speaking, yes, most probably it cannot be excluded that at a certain moment of time a treaty change will be unavoidable if further structural institutional development of the European Union is foreseen. Of course, when this time will arrive, when politically speaking, and that's highly political, when politically speaking, the maturity of the proposals and, of course, the larger European audience, because in most countries, at the end of the day, that will be subject to a referendum, and of course with all its risks. So I think it's a highly sensitive issue. Logically thinking, and personally my view is that's unavoidable that at a certain moment of time, the time will come for treaty change, but how to manage the right timing, the extreme important, the awareness, raising the awareness of the citizens who are going to vote about that, to create an atmosphere where it is really understood what is proposed and what is at stake is extremely important. So I wouldn't go further than that. And the last point which I want to make, I can only imagine a future European Union where it's finally a big family. And in the big family, one might have better talent for that and the other one better music talent and so on. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't like to be a member of the family when you have first-class members and second-class and third-class members within the family. In the family, each and every family member should be on the same footing, even if he or she plays better piano and the other is better talented in languages. But at the end of the day, that's all of the members of the family who are living within the family. So I can't imagine, frankly speaking, on the long term, very divided first-class and second-class Europe for
So we're back with the same question. Let's say no discrimination. We need to have the single market integrity of the EU for the EU 28 overall. Ms. Yoroskova, you want to add something on that issue before I turn to a Eurozone member again?
I think that from non-Eurozone countries, it was said everything. Nothing.
No, very good. But I found it extremely.
Absolutely agree with our colleague. And
I found this extremely important to hear this, certainly, because, of course, we may hear it in Brussels in the context of the British debate, but not necessarily is coming from the countries Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary. Mr. Lucey, something on that issue, on the integrity, you fully agree?
Very briefly, regarding the political legitimacy, that was one of the questions. So many times during our discussions on deeper integration, it is said, and rightly so, that many proposals would require a functioning political union. And I agree, like in the ideal world, in the best of all possible worlds, it would be the case. Like, should we have a common Eurozone budget, then yes, it should be run by some kind of a common democratic authority with some responsibility, with accountability, etc. Nevertheless, I think like we are facing issues that are more pressing, and that we should not basically turn the perfect into an enemy of the good. And we have good solutions that do not require a fully functioning political union, and that's why we stress in our proposals instruments instead of like a fully functioning fiscal union or political union. It's possible to have some good solutions even without treaty change and without a political union. But I totally agree. In the end, it would be very good if there is some sense of responsibility and legitimacy, political speaking.
Any other questions? We have about 5 minutes left, and I think we touched on some very important issues. Aleš, a former colleague of mine, but who's working in Czech Republic.
Thank you, Aleš Miláš, Czech Government Office. I have a question that we have touched upon a little bit. We talked about treaty change, but about EU treaty change. But what if there will be actually a Eurozone treaty change in a sense? What if there is a further integration of the Eurozone, but not so much of the EU? What would the Central European countries think being left in a second tier of some kind of an EU, but not the core EU? And how could they react? What could we do right now to prevent this?
Could you explain, Alice, what you mean with the Eurozone treaty change? Meaning, as far as I know, there is no Eurozone treaty.
Of course, there is no Eurozone as an institution, and every treaty change will have to be made under the EU law. The question is, what if some proposals that we hear in Brussels, that we hear in Paris, maybe less in Berlin, about some further integration of the Eurozone, and what would the countries that are outside think about this, and how could they react to this?
Who dares to start?
Maybe I can just shortly. I think that this will be it's a very sensitive issue and difficult to answer, and I still do not believe that it will change. That this movement or this pushment for the changing will be so strong, because otherwise there would be a possibility that another countries, and it's not a Czech perspective, I do not think just as a person, could follow the British example, which they are doing the referendum and so on. So I think it's a very sensitive issue, and it could create very strong imbalances within the European Union among a lot of countries.
Mr. Balog?
My view, and I think I try to explain that, of course, I can't speculate what the reactions would be, but it would be very much against the thinking and the mentality of my government. So, as I said, we are for the full Europe. That doesn't mean that some countries which are members of the Eurozone cannot go faster and going ahead in integration, but legally speaking, the ins and outs cannot be divided or excluded, if you wish, from one to another. So I think that, and of course that's speculation, and that's my personal view, we would be extremely negative on that. We would against this. And in what way and manner, I don't know, that's speculation, but it is very much against the Hungarian thinking. We think that we have to go hand in hand together, which doesn't exclude the possibility for the Eurozone members to go faster and integrate faster, institutionalizing new bodies and new structures, provided that is open also for the outsiders if they so wish and they are able to and willing to abide the rules of the game. That could be produced through the banking union. There is a practical experience when the banking union proposal was put forward, that was put forward for the 28. All the 28 members participated in the discussion. At the end of the day, obviously that was mandatory for the Eurozone members, and on voluntary basis, any country could have a close cooperation with the ECB. And as far as I know, there are at least 2 countries which are eager to closely cooperate with the ECB on the
which are the ones?
outside
So
of the Eurozone.
They are the ones which want to opt in now into the Eurozone. I know Denmark is one which wants to join, but politically they cannot. So Hungary wants?
It is not Hungary,
Czech Republic?
the second one. The second one is Romania. It is public information. Romania is definitely wish to cooperate closely with the ECB as far as the banking union is concerned. Hungary did not make any decision because we think that the banking union is not fully finished yet, the whole structure, and that is about the deposit insurance scheme, which is now again on the table.
Yes.
We, of course, would like to gather some practical experience, how the banking union really functions, and on one hand, assuring stability for the banking system, how the business models and how the operation of the banking system is going. It's already in place for roughly 1 year now, almost except for 1 year and 1 day,
exactly.
I think, November 4th. So I think we are gathering the practical information. We see how because what was the objective of the banking union? To cut the vicious circle of the sovereign and the banking indebtedness. And at the end of the day, if you don't have the deposit insurance scheme at European level, then in extreme cases, you can arrive to a situation that finally the domestic budget is still responsible for and is obliged to pay out the 100,000 euros for the depositors in case of a huge bank. If the new system could be put in place, I think that the whole picture, the whole structure as banking union would be finished. But it's not on the agenda for the time being. We are open to that, but decision will be made later. It's not a short-term idea.
Czech Republic, any intention to opt in to the banking union, or you don't know?
I think that it will be closely connected with joining the Eurozone.
Okay.
And is the question at the beginning difficult to say now? Maybe it will be the decision
but it's good to hear
of the
there
next government.
Prospects on that, let's say, from this side of the EU. Very, very positive to hear this.
But as to the research, I think that we are the second country which join.
I saw now that the ratings are coming up, which are becoming a bit more representative. Probably we can change the screen. Time is over, but I want to see whether there is one last question, a brief question on the issues which we discussed. Okay, the rating is up again, the poll again, I mean, which I would expect from my perspective, certainly for the first, Poland being I hope it is representative. Certainly the first bet was not representative, but this one looks a bit more representative. But I don't know. You have to see from your perspective whether it's effectively Czech Republic or Hungary. But anyhow, it's nice to see Denmark above Hungary. That is interesting. So if there are no further questions, I would like to thank the three speakers, Ms. Jiroskova, Mr. Sorry, I forgot your name. Bogdan and Mr. Lessay for this very interesting panel. I recall 3 points which I would like to give to you as my conclusions. What I found extremely important for us to note, Eurozone membership is no longer automatic, as we discussed. So we have new implicit criteria, new criteria which have come in addition, which do not longer make it really automatic as it's written in the treaty. It will be a political decision which will have to be taken on both sides. Second issue which I would like to stress, and again, as I said when I opened this panel, I come here, I pick up new things or things which I don't feel enough in Brussels. I have felt that, again, the integrity of the EU is extremely important. It's not only the EU as being the Eurozone, which is sometimes certainly stressed a lot if you're in the midst of the EU or certainly in the capital of the, or say the main place of the European institutions. We shouldn't think only about Eurozone, but about the EU as a